Hey everybody, what if I told you there was a way to make your adventure and dual sport riding a piece of cake? Let's talk about it on today's video. And thanks again for stopping by the channel this week. If you're new here, please take a moment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Just know that it's always super appreciated. Alright, so let's get into this now. Being an adventure bike coach and off-road motorcycle trainer, I often get asked the question, what can I do to improve my skills? And to be honest with you, the answer to that question is actually quite diverse. It depends on the person who's asking, for starters, but there are also a host of things that one can do to improve their skills. Today, I just want to talk to you about riding a dirt bike off-road or doing some trail riding, perhaps on your own dual sport, to really hone in on some things and become a better rider and ultimately make adventure riding and dual sport riding super easy. Oftentimes when I work with new or inexperienced adventure riders, there's a little bit of a theme in terms of their behavior or their attitude, and that overwhelming or overarching theme seems to be a lack of confidence, and it's easy to end up there. Look, adventure bikes are big, they're heavy, there's a lot going on, and again, if you're just super inexperienced or maybe you're coming off of a bad crash, it's easy to lose or lack the appropriate level of confidence to ride one of these bikes. Therefore, I'm proposing to you, get a smaller motorcycle and work on your skills with that. As a matter of fact, I no longer train adventure riders on adventure bikes unless they already have one themselves. Reason being, it's just so much easier to develop confidence on a bike that is lighter, smaller, easier to control, and has less power. Fatigue is often another factor for some adventure riders, believe it or not. And look, I'm not going to advocate for you to go out here and ride terrain like this for 10 or 12 hours. It is fun, but it's not for everybody. But what I would advocate for is that you get a dirt bike or you get a dual sport and you go out there and you ride some longer rides over terrain that is probably a little bit more technical, and you build up for those long days in the saddle that ultimately come with riding an adventure bike. Speaking of terrain, I often tell people that terrain is what separates an apprehensive adventure rider from a confident adventure rider, and this is just another great example of where a good off-road bike or a dual sport motorcycle, you get it, you take it out trail riding, it could really serve you well in terms of improving your adventure bike skills, because in a matter of miles you'll probably encounter rocks, sand, mud, water, roots, uphills, downhills, lots of variety, lots of diversity out there trail riding, which will ultimately better prepare you for your next adventure ride. Now, to kind of close this thing out, I'll say this: trail riding by itself will ultimately make you a more confident and more experienced rider kind of by default, but it's not enough to just go out there and do this stuff aimlessly. For one, you don't want to tackle trails that are too tough. It's easy to get in over your head. Ride within your means, but also you need to hone in on your skills. You need to work on your technique. And that's where I really think the smaller dual sport and off-road motorcycles are a gem. Look, if you're brand new to motorcycling or you're coming off the street and looking to go off-road, my advice, get a smaller bike before you get the adventure bike. Try to understand whether or not you're actually going to like this, and then kind of work your way up to the big twin-cylinder machines. The big twins, the big adventure bikes, they're a lot of fun to ride, but they're not that fun to ride if you haven't developed the skills or you don't have the experience to handle one. I often tell people, I think the margin for error on an adventure bike is quite a bit slimmer than it is on a small dirt bike that you can probably manhandle. Look, these things weigh 200-300 pounds more than your average dirt bike, so you're working with a lot there. There's a lot to go wrong. And again, it's tough to get away from these bikes if something goes wrong too. So let's close it out with this piece of advice. I've been talking about it the entire video, but if you're new to the sport or you want to improve your adventure riding skills, get a smaller bike, focus on your technique, develop confidence, work on body position, braking, the clutch, throttle application, where your eyes are looking, work on all of that stuff, essentially on a smaller scale, on a smaller bike, and it will all ultimately transfer over to the larger adventure bike. You're going to develop all these habits that become reflexive instead of reactive, and when we make harsh reactions out there on the adventure bikes, that's when things go wrong. That's where that margin for error, that slim margin for error, really becomes problematic. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in this week. We'll catch you next week with another video. Until then, stay safe throughout the holidays and keep it on two wheels.